Mississippi has some great ghost stories. This is one of the oldest. In the centuries before settlers ever crossed into Mississippi's territory, the Choctaw people held many beliefs as to how the world worked. One of those beliefs revolved around something called the Shadow People. The Shadow People were sometimes called the Impa Shalup. Sometimes they were called by other names, and they were neither good nor evil, they simply were. Now, for the most part, these Shadow People left the living alone. But once you died, these were the creatures that either led you to paradise if you had led a good life, or they devoured you if you hadn't. And if you were devoured by one of the Shadow People, it meant an eternity of darkness. But one of the Shadow People didn't wait until you had died. He instead moved through the woods of Mississippi at night, known by the name Nalusa Falaya. He's described as being frighteningly thin, dark with long fingernails, standing 8 feet tall with no face. One story told of him involves 2 Choctaw boys who were known for shirking their responsibilities among the tribe. Their father was aware of their rebellious nature and he allowed it, but he warned them never, ever to go into the woods at night. Naturally, the boys broke that rule. And on that night, as they traveled through the moonlit trail, they noticed a tall, slender figure standing at the edge of a pond. They realized in that moment that all the sounds of the forest had suddenly gone quiet. And in that moment, the figure disappeared. The boys continued along the trail until they reached the edge of the pond, but the figure was nowhere to be seen. But out in the middle of the pond, they noticed a log floating by itself. As they watched, the log began to slide across the surface of the water towards them until it rose up to reveal itself as the figure. Terrified, the 2 boys began to race back through the woods towards their village, but every time they turned around, they could see the figure standing silently among the trees, watching them. As they reached the edge of the forest, the boys began to believe that they might just be safe. But as they crossed the threshold into the village, a long arm shot from the shadows, grasping the youngest boy and dragging him back into the forest. And despite the tribe's best efforts, the boy was never found. Now, the legend takes on many forms throughout Choctaw history, but several key elements always remain the same. The tall, dark, faceless figure that feeds on confusion and fear. It exists as a physical embodiment of psychological terror, paralyzing its victims with indecision. And its persistence throughout the years of Choctaw tradition tell us that it's more than just a boogeyman. The Nalusa Falaya is fear itself, hiding in the shadows, preying on the mind, and an eternal warning to never surrender to fear, lest fear itself drag you back into the shadows.